The meeting is live.
Great, thank you, clerk. Hello, colleagues and attendees and those watching on the interweb. What is today's date? April 27th, and we're here for a special meeting of Halifax West Community Council. I hope everyone's staying safe, especially with the new lockdown that just happened in our province. So make sure you wash those hands and keep the family close. So real quickly, we'll do a check of folks' cameras and audio, starting with Councillor Morse.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Looking forward to the meeting this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddle.
Hello, everyone.
Councillor Stoddard.
Good evening, colleagues and those watching from home. Looking forward to the meeting.
Thank you, and Councillor Cleary.
Coming to you live, well, almost live from the Armdale Rotary. Just had I see him coming up here. Councillor Mason just texted me. He was on his way.
Great. And we knew you'd be here, Councillor Mason.
Almost wasn't, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that, everybody. I saw the cancel for the regional center meeting that was also on today and thought this one was canceled. Thank you, Sean, for texting me.
Oh gosh. Oh, well, we're happy that you're here. So with that, we'll meet call to order. Ask for approval of the minutes from April 13th and April 14th, 2021.
I so move.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Cottle, seconded by Councillor Stoddard. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none. Have the minutes. Approval of the order of business. We have one item on the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions, clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is no deletion or addition for today's meeting.
Thank you. Move the order of business.
So moved.
Councillor Cleary moves, second by Councillor Stoddard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none. Great. Call for declaration of conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Seeing none. Consideration of board business. We have none. Moving on to our hearing, which is 6.1.1 case 20871 development agreement for lands located at Almond in St. Albans, Halifax. And I believe we have staff here to give a presentation. And really quickly, I'll just run through the order of events. So staff will do a presentation followed by questions of clarification from members of council, if there are any. After that, we'll give the applicant an opportunity to present up to 10 minutes. And also any clarifications, questions from members of council. And we also have one speaker tonight who is registered to speak, and they will have 5 minutes, and we will get there when we get there. And let's go to number one, which is the staff presentation. Jennifer.
All right, thank you, Chair. My name is Jennifer Chapman, and I am here to present case 20871, which is a development agreement for 6070 Almond Street. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if there's any technical issues with that. Okay, hold on, presenter mode. Okay, can you see everything okay?
Yep, looks good.
Yep.
Okay, great. So as mentioned, my name's Jennifer Chapman, and I'm a planner with the Urban Enabled Applications team, and I'm here to present the request for a development agreement at 6070 Almond Street. So the applicant is WSP Canada, and they're acting on behalf of Westwood Construction. The lands are located at 6070 Almond Street, as mentioned, and the proposal is to construct a large-scale development on the site with 5 building towers, which we refer to as building elements, that are all connected underground with a 2-level parking garage. I did want to note that the staff report did indicate that the unit count was 520, but it should have said 620, and there was 2 numbers listed for commercial square footage, and the correct one was 4,950 square meters of commercial space. So the development, as mentioned, is on that shared parking garage. So it is effectively one building, but does appear to be broken up above ground. So here, outlined in red, you see the site. It is east of Roby Street in a largely commercial area on lands that are in the Halifax land use bylaw, was on what was referred to as Schedule Q. So this is a largely commercial node that does transition to residential as it moves towards the west. And here you see a slightly older picture of the site once all the buildings were demolished on the site. Before I get into everything, I did just want to briefly go over exactly how we regulate land use in HRM. So we start off with our regional plan and subdivision bylaw, which does guide population growth and where the investment of services should go. And this then filters down into the community plan, which outlines how many different types of development activities may occur. So certain uses may be permitted, provided that they go to council for approval, either through a rezoning or development agreement, and get that public feedback. Other uses are directed to be permitted through the land use bylaw, through development permits, and through an as-of-right process. So in this area, the lands are currently within the regional center secondary municipal planning strategy. The lands are zoned CEN 2 or Center 2 and designated center. So under the enabling policy of the Center Plan 10.25, this did enable applications submitted before the advertising of council's intent to adopt the new plan to be considered under the policies of the previous plan. So this application does predate the Center Plan by quite some time, as it was submitted in 2016. So the policies that we're actually looking at are nestled within the Halifax Municipal Planning Strategy. And these are what we refer to as the Schedule Q policies, which enable the development of residential and mixed use buildings within commercial areas, subject to a development agreement. The lands are currently under construction, so I did want to kind of briefly touch base on that. While the development agreement application has been ongoing, the property is currently subject to the requirements of the regional center bylaw, which does allow for certain limits of construction without a development permit or site plan approval. In this case, anything under 0.6 meters in height is permitted without requiring that development permit. So the applicant did decide to apply for permits to develop the underground parking structure, knowing that there was risk associated with that as this development was not approved, and with the understanding that if this development does not get approved, they'll proceed with a different form that complies with the center plan on top. I know that a construction permit was issued, which stipulates that the building can't go over 0.6 meters, and the development has exceeded these heights, and a stop work order has been issued. So here we see the site plan. So you can see that there is these 5 tower elements. So there's building tower A, building tower B, building tower D, the townhouses, building C, and building E. So there's these 5 towers with 1 row of townhouses on a shared underground building podium. And these will house intended to house 620 residential units. 50% of the units on site will be required to be 2-bedroom units to help accommodate some of those larger family style units, and 10% of the units in building element A will be a minimum of 3-bedroom. The site also provides 4,950 square meters of commercial space and 550 parking spaces in that underground parking garage, and provides for a shared street design through the site, which is to encourage pedestrian and cycling, as well as other transportation options through the site. So I wanted to get into a little bit of detail around what the buildings look like. So here we see building element A, which is the largest building element on the site at 30 stories with a tower floor plate of approximately 1,300 square meters per floor. So staff did work with the applicant on this, as we are concerned about the size of this floor plate, and we worked with their architect to come up with some ways to break up the massing using various belting and color techniques to sort of create some definition on the site so it doesn't look quite as large. Staff also worked with the applicant again on the units. So in order to provide larger units on the site, the building needed to be a little bit larger. So to ensure that this is the outcome, the development agreement does have that requirement for 65% of the units to be 2 bedrooms. And then within this building element, 10% of the units must be 3-bedroom or more. There's also restrictions on how small these units can be. So 102 square meters in this building and for a 2-bedroom, and 125 square meters for a 3-bedroom. Building element B would be on the other end of the podium of building element A, and it would be 32 meters tall and 8 stories with 94 residential units and just under 1,800 square meters of commercial space. Building element C would be approximately 13 stories and just under 48 meters tall with 110 residential units and 1,124 square meters of commercial space. Building element D, which would be located to the west on Almond Street, so on the corner furthest from Roby Street, would be 12 stories with 86 residential units and 352 square meters of commercial space. This building does sort of transition down into the townhouses, where there would be 8 townhouse style units that are about 3 stories tall and just a little over 9 meters. Lastly, we have building element E, which is located on the same portion of the site as building element C. This would be a 10-story building of just under 41 meters tall with 65 residential units and 324 square meters of commercial space. So the policy that we used to review this application was policy 2.32 and 2.33 under the Halifax Municipal Planning Strategy, which has since been deleted. This policy directs council to consider the relationship of new development to adjacent properties and uses and the mitigation of impacts through effective urban design and landscaping. So staff reviewed this application and felt that the area surrounding it really is a true mixed-use area with a variety of residential, commercial, and industrial activities happening all around the site. The height is centered in the middle of the site away from existing buildings to help reduce that impact on the surrounding area. The land use also provides a transition from the commercial and industrial land use that's occurring to the east, which is also zoned CEN 2 under the center plan. And that really does speak to a desire to transition these land uses away from an industrial use and more to a commercial residential mix. And then again, as I mentioned, the height steps down from Almond Street and it gets lower as the property approaches the lower height properties located on St. Albans Street. The building also provides activations along St. Albans frontage, in addition to activating Almond Street and the interior driveways through the use of doors and at-grade commercial uses. The policy also directs us to consider how the proposal integrates into the traditional grid street system. And here, the applicant is proposing to bring in those 2 driveways that were mentioned. They connect with the traditional street grid and do bring that connectivity through to the existing neighborhoods. But at the same time, the street design is designed to encourage a variety of different types of activities on that driveway, which will then help to meet the next point, which is to discourage traffic from infiltrating through these sites into the existing neighborhoods and to stick to the Almond Street, Roby Street corridors. The policy also directs council to consider the quality of the design detail. And I would say that these buildings are well articulated with high transparency and frequent entry points. Landscaping is proposed throughout the site, and it's really used to enhance as well as wind impacts and provide some outdoor amenities. Again, the total building volume for Building A is and may negatively impact the street level experience through shadow impacts, but the visual impact of that building has been reduced through the clever use of white around the tower of Building A to define them and break up the massing visually. The policy also directs council to consider the provision of high quality open space and leisure areas, which would be provided in accordance with the center plan, as well as there's an outdoor landscaped area that can be used as a small pocket park. So the level of public engagement was consultation that was achieved through a mail out and a public information meeting with table discussions, and that was held way back in January 22nd, 2019. So there was a lot of feedback that we heard from the community, and generally they like the neighborhood concept, they like the mobility through the site, and they like the design of the buildings. They were concerned, however, with traffic, parking, and the height of the towers. So for this public hearing, or for that public meeting, staff mailed out over 1,000 postcards, and we had 91 people attend the meeting. And since for this hearing, we've received 7 letters of correspondence, and we had 351 web page views in April. So this provides a model of the site just to show how the site kind of fits in around it. So it is a lot more height than you would see in the surrounding area. That height is centered in the center of the height and in the center of the site, but does step down around the edges. On February 25th, 2019, the application went to Halifax Peninsula PAC, and they were generally fairly supportive of the site. I did want to mention that the DA does maintain much of what was recommended by PAC, but PAC did reference affordable housing and the inclusion of a cultural space in building element E. So I did want to note that while the developer has expressed an intention to develop a portion of the site for affordable housing, nothing in the development agreement requires this, nor can it become part of the agreement within the planning policy that is applicable to this application. If the developer chooses to provide affordable housing, that's great, but it is outside of the municipal process. Building element E in its original design was intended to be used for a cultural space. However, the applicant was unable to secure a lease for this building, and the space will instead operate as a mixed-use building. So we had quite a lot of consultation with the applicant internally after our public meeting. I think we went through something like 12 revisions on the site. And there was some changes after public consultation. So building element E, the height increased from 27 stories to 30. B increased from 7 stories to 8. C increased from 10 to 13. D increased from 10 to 12 stories. And building element E increased from 2 to 10 stories. And the townhouses were originally designed as 4 stories, and they went down to 3. There was also massing and articulation changes to the building, and the podium height of the central podium was increased from 2 stories to 3 stories. We also had some land use changes. So the commercial use on the site was was decreased across the site to respond to market conditions, and the institutional use in building element E was changed to that of a mixed-use building. So again, a brief summary of the key aspects of the proposed development agreement. So it is a maximum of 620 residential units. There's 5 towers and 1 row of townhouses on that shared underground building podium, which has the 550 parking spaces. The development agreement requires a minimum of 50% of the units to be 2 bedrooms and 10% of the units in building element A to be a minimum of 3 bedrooms. There is a maximum permitted commercial space of 4,950 square meters, and there is a shared street design to allow multimodal transportation throughout the site. The development agreement also has requirements for landscaping, including the provision of interim landscaping areas should areas of the site remain undeveloped for 18 months. The development agreement also outlines what changes can be made through a non-substantive amendment process. So a non-substantive amendment is a change to the agreement which can be made without a formal public hearing. The only amendments that can be considered for these grandfathered applications under the center plan are non-substantive amendments, and future substantive amendments are not permitted under policy. So as proposed, the non-substantive amendments within this development agreement would include changes to the landscaping plan, changes to enable the conversion of the parking podium that is on a separate building that is located on Gladstone Street, but is a corner of it would be on this site. So they would like to be able to change that parking podium in the future to townhouses, and there may be a slight encroachment onto this site to enable that. The development agreement also allows the heights of the building elements to be reduced, and it allows for changes to the date of commencement and the completion of development dates. So with that, staff recommend that Halifax and West Community Council approve the proposed development agreement as set out in attachment A of the staff report. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Just open up the chat here. Any questions or clarification from members of council? Seeing none, colleagues don't mind. Can I speak from the chair? All right, see some thumbs up. Okay, Councilor Cuttle, I see hands waving.
Sorry, I lost my buttons there. I'm just wondering if staff can talk a little bit about the proximity of this proposed development to other outdoor spaces, public spaces, parks, and like other, particularly outdoor spaces.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the north end of Halifax is an area that really is lacking in outdoor spaces. So I believe the nearest outdoor parks would be Needham Park, located down along Gottingen.
Okay, so I mean, I think that is a concern, because when we do look at this, we know it will be one of the densest developments on the peninsula. I've been raising, prior to this position, the need for open space, and I don't understand why we're selling Bloomfield across the street where there is park space. That was HRM, and now we're losing that. Is there in the center plan at this point an open space network plan that considers access to public spaces in relation to this increased density we're creating?
To be honest, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I'm not sure exactly where that is at in the center plan. I know that was something that had come up in the past as a need in in the regional center as a whole, but I'm not sure of the status of anything like that.
And I mean, okay, because, you know, there's not just this development, there's like several other developments. And so, I mean, when we look at things kind of in silos, we kind of miss the bigger picture. So some analysis from staff on potential open space amenity to complement the density that we're permitting, because I do think the density is a good thing, but we have a responsibility on our end as well to ensure that what we're allowing to happen is supports the citizens and potential residents. So I don't know if there's an ability to get some kind of information report or some more information on that. Is what I fear is that
Council, this sounds a little bit like debate.
a debate. Okay, information on a green space plan would be really wonderful.
Yeah, and that'd be Carl, before
Evening, councillors. Carl Purvis, Planning Applications Program Manager. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I know that in the creation of Center Plan, they started with a blank slate and they started to look, the way they decided in terms of areas which would be suitable for increased density versus areas which would maybe less suitable for it, is they started to layer on top some considerations. So they looked at open and available land, underutilized land. They looked at capacity in sewer, capacity in water, available open space, school availability. I mean, so open space was one of those considerations. I know that as Jennifer mentioned, you've got Fort Needham Park to the northeast. You've got the Halifax Common to the southeast, and then you've got a much smaller park, Ardmore Park, to sort of the southwest. So there's not something that's in the immediate proximity, but in the area, there's very large spaces with sort of a variety of uses, like Fort Needham and the Halifax Common. So it's maybe lower quantity, but high quality in terms of the proximity, but it was something that the center plan looked at. And I think that, when Jennifer and I have been looking at this file, it was one of those things where it was the center plan is pointing to this as an area that is suitable for a lot of growth, a lot of increased density, this being a center. And we sort of piggybacked on that to say, all right, perhaps it's warrant of some increased densities via this development agreement process, given that analysis that they did earlier on in the center plan.
Okay, is any of this noted in the staff report? I'm just wondering. I didn't see it. No. Okay, thank you.
Let's see, he doesn't.
Yeah, whatever you said, Carl, it cut out, but you said okay, so I think you're fine.
Good.
All right, cool. Councilor Morse.
Yeah, just a question on page 8 of the staff report. There's a statement that the proposal would need to be altered significantly if the development were to be considered within the context of the new regional center plan policies. I'm just wondering if you could maybe outline some of those significant alterations that you're talking about, just to give those of us who are newer to the process a sense of what that would be.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the center plan is essentially a completely different process for reviewing these types of applications. So much of what the center plan talks about requires streets. So the way the building gets articulated and massed is in relation to the street. So most of the road frontages on this application are actually those driveways. So they're not public streets, they're driveways. So the massing kind of, in the development agreement process, we were able to kind of say, hey, we're going to treat that as a street, and we're going to mass the building as if this is a street, and we're going to have setbacks along there, and we're going to provide some articulation, whereas the center plan would want all of the activity to be occurring along Almond Street and St. Albans Street. The center plan has a maximum height of 90 meters, and then it uses something called floor area ratio. So the floor area ratio is essentially just a little bit of math where you say the lot is this size, and I'm going to multiply it by, in this case, it's 5.5, and that lets me know how much square footage of a building I can get, and then I'm going to mass it in accordance with that. So there would be quite a fair bit of work that would need to be done to review the application against that. It's just a completely separate process, and there's less flexibility in it, and given the size of the site, they probably have to go through some sort of subdivision process to create something that would actually work better on the site.
Okay, I'm just, so to sum up then, is it fair to say that the tallest building would have to be shorter and that the street view would be different? Is that right?
Correct. So the tallest building the maximum height would be 90 meters. And then there is some tower.
Sorry, how many stories is that for those of us who can't do the math?
So, well, the maximum height right now on the site is right around 110, and that gets you to that 30 meters. So, you know, a floor is roughly a little over like 3.5 meters per floor. So, you know, depending on certain conditions, you probably get around a 20, 25 story building.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else before I speak from the chair? No? Again, sorry, I took my camera. Thank you, Jennifer, for the presentation. Really quickly, you spoke, and I didn't know this information, you spoke to a stop work order that's been issued. I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that a little bit more, because I wasn't aware of that piece. You mentioned the 2-bedroom requirement, which is in the regulations. Where did that mass end up? Did it end up going to the height, or did it end up going to the width? Or I'm not exactly sure. The other question, actually, that's for the mixed use. So for building E, and I'll ask this to the applicant as well. Building E, obviously there was a hope that it would be some type of art center from the original application, and now that's changed, and the height has been changed from 2 to 10. And then in terms of mixed use, what falls under mixed use again? Because I forget.
Okay, so let's just start with your first question, which was around the stop work order. So as you probably noticed on site, there's a lot of activity occurring, and that is in accordance with the regional center plan. So a permit was issued for all of the below grade work, and activity went a little bit higher than it was supposed to, which is anything in excess of 0.6 of a meter. So at that point, a stop work order was issued. So that's kind of where that is at. In terms of the...
Sorry, really quickly, when was that issued?
I'm not sure of the exact date. I want to say it was a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And then in terms of the bedroom count, so staff worked a lot with the applicant on the size of the tower element A, because it is quite tall and it is quite large. And there the applicant responded to some of staff's concerns with providing larger units. So that was the 2 bedrooms and 3-bedroom units. And we wanted those units to actually be a decent size for people. So in the development agreement, we included requirements A for a minimum of the units on the site, the entire site, to be 50% of them to be 2 bedrooms. And then within tower element A, that was 10% had to be 3 bedrooms. And then, I'm sorry, what was your other question around the negotiation of that?
So I'm just wondering where, because you said that the applicant had to change the building mass due to the ask from staff. So I'm just wondering where that ended up. Did it ended up in heights, or making the footprint or the building wider?
No, that wasn't, sorry, I think I must have misspoke. No, the applicant didn't change the massing. Staff just worked with them around the massing.
Okay,
We wanted a smaller building, and the applicant said, no, I want to do these larger units, and to really make the space actually function the way those tower plates need to function. In order to provide those larger units, I'm going to need a larger tower plate. So we got to a compromise on the site with the tower, with the dimensions that it has, but with those requirements for the larger units. And then your question around the mixed use building. So a mixed use building is just like a residential, usually it's a residential and commercial component. In this case, it's residential in the upper stories with ground floor commercial.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. That's it for me. Nothing from members I see. Okay, so we'll move on to the presentation from the applicant. And I believe we have Christina Lovett here. I see you're in the meeting. Great to see you. Hello.
Hello. Hi. Just doing a little test, I guess, before our minutes start.
Yep, you're all good. Sound
Good.
great on here. And you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. I guess we're going to switch halfway through to Susan as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, councillors, for considering the Richmond Yards Development Agreement tonight. I am Christina Lovett with WSP, and here with me are Danny Chedra of Westwood and Susan Fitzgerald of FBM. And we're really excited to be here to present the design rationale and vision for this important property. We want to start by thanking planning staff for their hard work, comments, and working with our team to shape the building design, engage further with the public and PAC, and help to craft clauses within the DEA, which will allow the full vision of the site to be realized. This case does date back to 2016, and before making an application, Westwood and WSP conducted a series of public engagements with the formal application and subsequent revised submissions, submissions building off the findings of this engagement. So from that engagement, we heard that providing a variety of housing types and units for families was important, increasing connectivity through the site and focusing on the pedestrian. Next. The site is over 4 acres in the north end with frontage in Almond Street, Almond and St. Albans Street. The site benefits from being near Roby and Almond, which are major transportation routes across the peninsula. The site is near the Commons, Fort Needham Park, and the Halifax Forum, and permitting more housing here provides residents with easy access to employment and entertainment opportunities. As Jennifer outlined, this is a Schedule Q policy, which allows council to consider areas that would benefit from comprehensive site planning and was established to address challenges with introducing new residential uses into existing commercial and industrial areas. Next. The site's surrounded by existing and new multi-residential buildings along Gladstone Street and at the corner of Almond and Gladstone, industrial type uses along St. Albans and Clifton Street, and commercial along Roby and Almond Street, including large format commercial and a parking lot on Almond Street. Next. The mixed use proposal consists of 5 building elements on a shared underground parking podium, a bike shop and storage building, 2 outdoor gathering spaces at grade, as well as 2 usable podium spaces at the 4th level. It's 620 units and 4,950 square meters of commercial space. And there are parking maximums, 550 underground and 30 at grade spaces possible. Next. So the heights do range from 3 to 30 stories. This is from 14 meters to the 103 meters, actually just correction on the 110. And actually 7 meters of that is mechanical space. So when it comes to residential space, it ranges from 14 meters to 96 meters in height. Podiums are 3 stories, including the substantial podium of building C, the link between building A and B, and the townhouse blocks. And this offers a diverse range across the site. And having building element A as the tallest building allows to keep heights in the mid-height range for the other upper building elements, and also allows the 3-story heights across a large portion of the site. Next. So the proposal includes a rich mix of unit types with multi-residential units across the site. Notably, building element A provides larger units for families with 65% 2 bedrooms or greater and 10% 3 bedrooms or greater. And compared to the center plan reg, the requirement is just 25% 2 bedrooms or greater. Townhomes and live work units looking out onto Clifton Green are provided, and this creates a pleasant and inviting space. Overall, the development will be at least 50% 2 bedrooms or greater. And now Susan is going to speak to the overall design intent, and you can flip to the next slide.
When we started working on this project, we studied the surrounding context and listened to what everybody said. We identified some issues with the current site and the immediate area. These included the presence of large blocks that are very hard to get around and very little green or public space in the area. Next. From living in the neighborhood on King Street, I know that the community is a rich mosaic of people and businesses, and some of them are shown on the screen. It is probably one of the most diverse areas of the city, and we want to keep it that way with residential, commercial, small businesses, a place where people can live, work, and socialize. Next. Two things are lacking in this neighborhood, as has already been discussed, and those are public space and green areas. One of the project's main objectives is to add these for both the residents and the citizens. We've done this in King Square, which is shown in tan, which is a hardscape plaza, which will be used for both surface parking and as an event space. And that might include food trucks, street markets, and other celebrations. Clifton Green, which is shown as a triangular park, will be an urban forest and a green space for all. There are also amenities for the residents, including private balconies, and there is a large podium between building A and B, and a podium to the north of building C, which are all vegetated. Such spaces are more important than ever during this current pandemic. Next. One of H&RM's planning goals is to improve connectivity on the peninsula and to integrate new development into the street grid pattern and to facilitate access to public transit. This was achieved by the yellow on Ormond Street is the carving off of a portion of the property to become part of the right-of-way space for HRM's protected bike lane. And then shown in purple is King Street and Clifton Street, and then a third right-of-way on the property that go through the site. These are a shared street with pavers, not asphalt. They'll be used for pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicles to go through the site. There are also pedestrian connections in the east-west direction, shown in blue, that you can actually pass between the buildings, and you can go all the way in time to Roby Street. There will also be a future connection from Clifton Green to Gladstone, and the purple circles show the access to the underground parkade. Next. In the AXO, you can see the building in context with the low street walls throughout the site. We've only added substantial height to the north edge of the site, and that's to maximize the sun exposure in the neighborhood. The shadow predominantly falls on the large-scale box stores and parking to the north of the site on Ormond Street. Along Clifton Street, you can see the townhouses and also the bike shop, which will be another great amenity for the site. Next. This is the view from King Street, and it shows one of the shared streets. It is the extension of King Street. The project includes a great deal of vegetation throughout the project and the planting of over 100 trees. This is significant for what was largely industrial land. Materials include masonry at street level and wood, and lighting has been carefully considered in the development. Next. Here is a view of King Square. This is the plaza. It has multiple storefronts opening onto it. In the corner is the pedestrian access to Clifton Green to increase permeability through the site. The rooftop garden and podium deck overlook the square. Next. Here are two views of Building A. On the left-hand side, you can see along Ormond Street, the protected bike lane with trees planted along its length. On the right-hand side is the view from the Gladstone building, looking down on the shared landscape podium. The townhouses and the live work are in the foreground, and in between them is Clifton Green. Next. This site was originally used for manufacturing wood railway cars. As a local material, wood is incorporated into the design. There was also the Dominion Textile Company close to the site. Memories of the textile industry are evident in the lace pattern of the metalwork. Next. In closing, I would like to say that this project has learnt from the rich surrounding context and the conversations we've had to bring housing, amenities, small businesses, public space, connectivity, and vegetation to this part of the city. We see it as a place where people can live, work, and socialize together. Thank you.
Assuming that's it.
That is the end.
Okay, great. Thank you, Susan. And Christina. Are there any questions from members at all? And I'll wait for any frantic waving of hands for a moment, just in case.
Mr.
Yep,
Chair.
I see one frantic hand. All right, Councilor Cleary.
Thank you very much. It was questioned earlier, and it wasn't clear on the visuals that were shown. I'm assuming you did some shadow studies and some wind analysis, but in the shadow studies, because it was questioned around things like sunshine earlier and the impact it would have from shading from the buildings. Do you have any images that show specifically the shading that would happen at different times of the day, either from the tallest tower on Almond or any of the others?
Yes, we have done sun studies, and actually the whole development was really organized around the path of the sun, and also wind studies. The sun studies showed that, of course, the area to the south, which is the where we have the lowest rise, and Clifton Green, that's why we located it there, and that's why we located building element A, the tallest building component in the project, in that particular area, because it casts its shadow onto the big box store across the way and the parking lot. So yes, we actually use sun right from the beginning and wind to shape the project. We also did a wind study. RWDI did the wind study, and we worked very closely with them and they have outlined that wind study and said that we are actually doing much to mitigate any wind sort of changes on the site.
And would the wind mitigation, would that largely come from obviously the layout of the buildings, but also the articulation on the buildings, especially the design of the tallest building in terms of the way it sort of comes down in different forms?
Absolutely. All of those were taken into account through the wind studies, and we shaped it based on the wind studies. So that was the sort of the belting of the building, and where and also where the podium was, and also with the lacy patterns that we're showing. So all of those things are part of really working with the wind.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
I
Chair.
can just, do you want me to?
Oh, sure. If,
I was just going to add to, you can see in the development agreement as well in the schedules, there is a schedule that's regarded with screening and wind mitigation features built into the DA.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Really quickly from me, again, thank you for presenting tonight. I'm just wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit on the information I learned tonight around the stop work order, just from your understanding what work was being complete that had to stop.
Sure. I'll let Danny address that. Obviously, he's the construction guy on the site. So
Right.
yeah.
Yes, Councillor. The explanation there was that we started work here a year and a half ago on the site. And the reason we started is that the site is, because of its past history, it's heavily contaminated. And we spent the last year and a half removing contamination from the site, where it's actually over $6 million of contamination that had to be removed from the site. It wasn't just the soil, but also the rock was impacted with hydrocarbons. So when you dig and remove this large quantities of contaminated material from the site, you don't want to refill it in with new material, then you have to dig it back up. We applied to the city to build the parking structure below grade. And so as we remove the contaminated material, we wanted to replace it with a non-occupiable, just a structure to fill that while we go through the process of getting approval for the above grade development that we are looking at tonight. In that process, as work continued out throughout the year, there was a miscommunication where they poured columns above grade. And this is where the issue came, where the stop work order came. It wasn't a stop work order on the entire site. It was on the portion that has exceeded above grade. So we've continued to remove the contaminated soil and fill that in with parking garage structure until this development, if this development gets approved tonight. If not, then we have to go to Plan B. This, I think in the long term, we've done a lot for construction mitigation on this site. As you know, that this is a contentious issue throughout HRM with all the amount of construction that's happening and the comfort of residents. So the longer this hole stays open, the longer the construction inconvenience to the neighborhood. We've taken measures to mitigate that. We've installed a signalized intersection at the corner of Gladstone and Almond Street at our cost of $80,000 to make especially the clients of the CNIB that are in the area to be able to use a signalized traffic light to cross the street safely. But these are all temporary measures. We're hoping the city will keep the lights up. We spent the $80,000, and I think the residents have really embraced those lights as a convenient factor. But the goal here is to fill in the hole, get it backfilled, and try to bring back some public right-of-ways back to the public. So I think it was the stop work order again was basically on a certain section where the construction went beyond that scope, but we've stopped that and we've continued with the below grade work. And so I'm hopefully that will clarify that issue for you.
Yeah, that was helpful, because I was wondering if it was on the whole site, but you said it was just that aspect, so that's great. Other question I had related to building A. So I think you might actually address this, Christina, but the big black piece that's on the rendering that's kind of in the middle of the building A, that and it goes above the residential. That's the mechanical piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that space would not have any inhabitable space at all. It's just mechanical room, and I don't know.
Yeah, that black piece on the top, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So really the height itself, like I said, it's the height you're getting a bit, about 96, but that part that puts you about to the 103 is that mechanical space on the top.
Then being able to have more time to look into the application, what two pieces that have come up that we haven't had a chance to talk about. One is in understanding now from tonight that staff advocated for, I guess, a smaller building, and you want to keep the size of your units to what they are today. And obviously, as we go forward, the actual building or square footage of the rooms, we don't have that in the report. So my question is, we have a maximum of what residential units you can have in each building.
Correct.
So that's changed from your original application from what went to the public in 2019, I believe. So what I'm just curious on is what feedback that did you get from 2019 to add the higher heights on all the buildings? Because one of the things that I heard was that people, height is a whole nother conversation we don't have to get into, but I heard height was too much. But from what I've seen tonight and what you shared is added height was because of the public meeting. So I'm just trying to get an understanding of
Sure.
where the rationale came from that.
Yeah, so part of the added height too was, this was alluded to in the summer time, there was a switch from about 2 stories of commercial to not have 2 stories of commercial for the podium just because of market fluctuation. So that's gone to having 1 story of commercial, and then that podium has changed from 2 to 3 stories essentially, and that's so we're adding more residential in that. So a 2nd story of commercial turned to a 2 and 3 story of residential in the podium level.
Is that building A?
That's really all the podiums.
Okay, all the podiums.
Because it's a mixed use, so it's commercial in all the podiums. So it happened at all the podiums. Yeah. So that demand and the want for the larger units as well, like you said, embedded in the DA itself, and that was always from the beginning a want, and embedded in the DA itself is that unit size, and also the requirement of having such a high requirement of 2 and 3 bedroom units as well was driving that. And also when, I guess in comparison to when we talk about density, in comparison to center plan, this is actually slightly under the density of what you'd get from center plan. So it's a mixed FAR across the site, which is a 4.25 and a 5.5, with predominantly being 5.5. And from that would equate to 85,000 square meters permitted. And this development has 82,706 square meters. So we're actually doing slightly less than the density we would get through center plan. If that answers your question.
No, that's helpful. And that's it for me. Councilor Cleary, yeah.
So I just I put in the chat there for another question, because Councillor Smith's question, our chair, and your answer, Ms. Lovett, sort of sparked me to think. So typically when we hear from builders and they're looking at, building a new building or building a series of buildings, it's all about this ball of clay. And, you got some clay that goes over here, and if you take some away, it moves somewhere else. So you just said you moved it from, I forget the exact number, it was 85,000 square meters to 82. So it's less than what you had before. I don't usually hear people saying we took away clay.
Yeah.
So what does that mean, that there's more open space or more free space? Like if you're doing less than what you would have done or could do, what does that mean to the whole site? Can you just describe for a second what you mean by that?
Yeah, and what I meant by that wasn't we took away less than what we had in earlier developments, but I'm saying when compared to like the underlining zone, the certain density.
So compared to what center plan would allow.
Compared to center plan. So the 85,000 is the center plan amount, and the 82 and change is what's coming in under here.
Okay, so for our planners then, because they say, well, this is the max you can get on a site in terms of floor area ratio coverage, because we want certain things like porosity, and we want public open space, and we want these things. So if you're doing less than what you could do under center plan, although this is coming under Schedule Q, not center plan, what does that mean for the site though? Like because I remember when you were going through the slides, you had some, it's always hard to tell from architectural drawings, but you had some like green areas, and you had some open areas, streets extending that didn't exist before in the old industrial buildings. So what does that, in practice, what does that mean when this is all built for the people who live on the site or the people who are in the neighborhood who go to the site?
Sure, I'll answer quickly, then I can let Susan jump in. So yeah, it does add that connectivity back through the site that didn't exist. So there's shared streets coming back through. And it allows those at-grade open spaces. So that's why, and the ground, like the pass-throughs as well through the building. So we're getting that east-west pedestrian connection, and the north-south through as well. And then it also really brings that having the predominant of the site at as that 3-story podium level. So it keeps things low in the middle. Susan, do you want to jump in?
Well, I would really echo a lot of what you said, but it was in things like the Clifton Green and the King's Square and the streets going through. Those are all incredibly important to the scheme and to really making public space for people, making really nice public space. I mean, none of these streets will be asphalted. They will be all paved. They all have rollover curbs. They all have trees. And so there's a significant amount of vegetation throughout the site, through along the streets and in Clifton Green and in King's Square. So I think these will be just really super nice places for events in the city, and to, there is very little vegetation in this neighborhood. I live on King Street. I know there's very little vegetation, and it was really seen as very important by us all to bring those public spaces into the city.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just on a point that you raised, Councillor Cleary, what is the total floor area, square footage with the proposal that we're looking at tonight?
Total square footage of area and the entire.
That will be built on.
Oh, like percentage coverage?
Yeah.
Area. I don't have that exactly. Okay. I know, Danny, I don't know if you or Susan have that. I know it's under, because we did it for the new engineering policy that came in January. I know it's, I think it's at least less than, we have at least 20%, I think, open space, because that was what triggers the cisterns on site for the, and I know that is what happens here.
I know that we're slightly over 50% of the site is occupied by either open space or 3-story structures.
Okay.
I know that number, but I just wanted to also add a point that when we went through the public engagement for several years, there was two very clear messages that I took loud and clear from those public engagement sessions. People wanted larger units. The trend has been on the Peninsula of Halifax to build micro units, and that's not what they wanted to see on this site. And 2, they wanted more open space. And I believe the plan that we have in front of you tonight, if it went through center plan forces you to go to more smaller size units, because the density we have here is not exceeding center plan, and the heights here are pretty well in conformance with center plan. But what center plan really pushes is towards smaller footprints. Smaller footprints equals micro units. The tower that people focus on a lot, the overall height is very close to center plan framework, but the footprint of that building is slightly larger than center plan. With that, we've been able to commit to 50% of those units in that tower being 2-bedroom or larger. And this is what the public wanted, where in center plan, we only need to meet a 25% quota. So I think the type of units in this development and the amount of open space is what is really we focused on, and what we got from the public feedback that was very important to them.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Cuddle, and then I'll be done really quickly because I didn't ask it correctly, but I did want the information about the total area. In the old proposal, and one of the drawings that was presented to us, it has the total floor area in square footage at 700,010. So I'm wondering if and you might not have this now, and maybe if you can even write it in the chat if you have to do some calculation. I'm just wondering what the new total floor area is for this proposal that we're seeing tonight.
For the entire, or like?
So what I'm looking at, and what I'm looking at from the old proposal, which 2019, it has building A, B, C, D, and E, and it has the gross floor area for each building.
Yep.
And then in the last column, it has total floor area, bracket SF, and it has 700,010.
Okay, so I have the total building area, excluding underground parking,
Right,
like
right.
underground,
Yeah.
is 82,706 square meters. Do you want me to convert it?
82706.
Yeah.
706. And then what is that in?
We can do that on the side of you.
All right, so you can even write it in the chat if you
Yeah.
don't have to do that. And I'll go to Councillor Cuttle if you have a question.
There we go. No, I just more comments that you know, I do very much appreciate seeing a development that aims to.
I don't want to cut. If it's a question of clarification, we'll take it. But
are you still in that part? Okay,
yeah, we're
I'll
still
stay there. Okay,
yeah,
well
yeah.
then that's fine.
Yeah,
No.
I don't want to cut you
Okay.
off.
No, that's fair, Mr. Chair. Understood.
Okay, great, thank you, Susan.
I'd like to clarify something also on the unit size. I think something that we've heard just in the profession recently is that given the pandemic as well, the need for larger. You know, we heard it from the public that they wanted larger units, and that has only been made more apparent with the pandemic and the need for more space for people in their own home. I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. So I'm seeing no further questions or clarification from members of staff. Thank you, Christina. 890 is the number that we have now. Great, thank you. So I'm going to open up the public hearing. We only have one speaker for tonight, and let me just go to the agenda. So we have Martha Purdy and any member of any member of the public who is registered for the clerk's office on this matter will have 5 minutes to address the topic. When I call your name, which we have Martha, I see you, Martha. Thank you. You'll have 5 minutes, and you can unmute, which you've done already, and we will give you a warning when you have 30 seconds left. And the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the chair, councillors, and the representatives from Westwood. My name is Martha Purdy, and I'm a physiotherapist, and I own property on Roby Street, 2742 Roby Street, and it's a healthcare center in a mixed-use building. So there's another business and then 2 apartments. And we back directly onto the construction site. And I think the concern for myself and for our patients and for our staff is just parking in the area. So I understand what the parking is going to be with the construction and with the development, but there hasn't really been any information released around what parking in the north end is going to look like, whether there's going to be changes to street parking. Owning a healthcare center, we really want to make sure we're accessible to our patients because a lot of them can't walk very far or they're experiencing pain. So looking at accessibility to our building, accessibility for our staff, for parking and that sort of thing just helps me with business planning on whether, you know, it would be super exciting to stay in the neighborhood because of all of these great things that are happening. But I'm just having a little concern about congestion in the area. And looking at, you know, there's going to be 620 units and 550 parking spots. So I'm just wondering how those underground parking spots are allocated, how many are for the public, how many are for people that are going to be going to those businesses in the neighborhood and also in the development. So yeah, that's thank you for having me and letting me voice concerns and questions about this.
Thank you so much, Martha. And what we'll do is well, you're the only speaker, so when you're finished, which I'm assuming you are, we'll get the applicant to respond to any comments they heard, and we'll go from there. So, Councilor Cleary, do you have a question of clarification for Martha?
Just a couple of quick questions of clarification for Ms. Purdy. So you indicated you have a physiotherapist business in the neighborhood. So you don't have, I know that area quite well. I used to live on Almond Street. So you don't have parking for your building at the moment, I'm assuming, and would rely on your clients showing up and parking on street or in other areas. Is that the concern? To make sure that, listen, I get it. My lawyer used to be there. Coastal Cafe is across the street. I know lots of businesses that rely on street parking. So is that the major concern you're worried about?
Yes, and we do have 5 parking spots for our unit, but it's 2 apartments and 2 businesses. So it's really not enough. So yeah, that is our major concern, and just interested to see what the neighborhood parking situation, whether there's going to be meters put in, whether there'll still be some streets that have unlimited parking, that sort of thing. What's the consideration for the neighborhood with this increase of population?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councilor Mason, do you have a question?
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. So this is probably Ms. Purdy's first hearing. So I wanted to ask a question because it wasn't clear in this presentation, and I'm not sure that. So what happens is the applicants can't, and you can't have a dialogue here. So you talk to us, and then you're done, and then they answer. So you wrote the letter, I believe, that asked what's going to happen with the alley behind your building. So I'm wondering if you could clarify your concerns there, and then that way it's on the record. And then when it gets to those folks, they can answer that question for you.
Sure, thank you for that. And yes, this is my first time. It's very exciting. I Zoom all the time, but not in this type of forum. I teach exercise on Zoom, so if anyone wants to do some squats after, I can lead you all in a good workout. So the alleyway is how we access the back of our building. So I did send an email, and I did get a response clarifying that right of way or that alleyway will be clear, because I did have some concerns just to make sure I had access to my property. So I did receive confirmation, I think from Jennifer, maybe emailed me back and said that's not a concern that I have anymore.
That's great. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Mason, for that. So it seems there's no other questions, clarification. Thank you again, Ms. Purdy, for joining us and sharing your concerns and questions. And what I'll do is, since you are the last speaker, I'll give the applicant 5 minutes to respond to anything further they'd like to address or anything else. You got 5 minutes.
Sure. Great. Thank you. I'll allow Danny's going to kind of jump in at the end here and allow him to address that around parking. I just want to close I want to thank you all for being here tonight, in the middle of the evolving situation in Halifax. And I want to circle back on the policy that Jennifer presented and how our development responds to that. So the relationship to the neighboring properties, and this design pays particular attention to these edge treatments with the low 3-story townhouses along the western edge, that pedestrian connection provided on the eastern edge leading towards Roby, and strategically placement of that predominant height, that building A, towards the middle of the north boundary, having that shadow pattern predominantly on the commercial and the parking lot on Almond Street. As well, that consideration of the street grid system and establishing connection through the site, through the shared street concept, extension of King and Clifton, and as well as creating that dedicated pedestrian east-west. The design provides high quality design at the street level through materials, protected overhangs for pedestrians, increased in sidewalk widths along Almond Street, landscaping, and specific terms within the DA about the screening of mechanical and the decorative, in doing it in a decorative feature way and embedded into the landscaping. It also provides that creative leisure space for future residents and the greater neighborhood through Clifton Green, the flex space of King Square, having that overall paver pattern for the shared streets, the landscaping, the predominant level of trees coming into the neighborhood, and that fourth level podium space. As well, it does provide that mix of residential unit types, a very high number of 2 bedrooms or greater required within this DA. The townhomes, the live work units, which we didn't touch on a lot, but is a good different mixed use coming in, and as well integrated with commercial to be truly mixed use. As well, the high quality building materials that Susan presented on, and the clever ways that are being used to address the building form. And as well, the nods to the past that those building materials produce and interpreted in a modern way. So now I'm going to throw it over to Danny.
And Danny, you have 2 minutes.
2
we know you
minutes.
like to talk.
Well, this has been, I get 2 minutes for 10 years worth of work here. It's been 10 years.
Be quick.
It's been 10 years since our company has started acquiring lands here. And truly, our vision for this site is diversity and inclusion. And we've spent many years, 7 different plans, and I believe this time we have it. Why diversity? Not everybody wants to live in a 1,000 square foot apartment. The majority of the units being built on the peninsula of Halifax today are less than 1,000 square feet. Our development, in terms of diversity and form, has buildings 3 stories, 8 stories, 12, and also 30. But it also has townhomes. It has live work spaces where young entrepreneurs can rent and work and live in the same location. We have apartments, the majority of them are over 1,000 square feet. So we're providing variety and diversity in terms of bringing young people, families, and elderly to live together. This development embraces not only active transportation, but public transportation. When we met with HRM task force on the bike lane, we didn't want a bike lane down Almond Street. We wanted a protected bike lane. And we gave up land and density to ensure we have a protected bike lane down Almond Street. We're working with public transportation. Ms. Purdy's comments about parking, we have 550 car parking garage being constructed here. 100 of those cars are going to be hourly parking for anyone in the neighborhood that needs to access parking to go visit small businesses in the neighborhood. But our dream and our vision is someday when HRM invests enough money in public transportation, we can take space there and turn it into community space because we're not going to need it for parking. And I'm hoping that dream comes through in the next 10 years when the investment in public transportation meets our expectation. Open space is another key factor here. Talking about an urban park in our city, planting 100 trees and green space, very important to our vision for this development. And within a 10-minute walking distance from this location and 4 minutes by bike, there's the Commons, the nicest open space, public open space in HRM. Inclusion. My personal and our personal as Westwood, affordable housing. We want people that can afford to live here also have the chance to live here. We have hired a firm, CBRE, who specializes in, they have a finance department that specializes in affordable housing financing. They are taking the application to CMHC. We're hoping to have this project qualify, a portion of this project qualify, where we can reduce the rents to bring in people that cannot afford to live in this neighborhood and work also in this neighborhood. This is our vision for this development. It's not just about building a building here. We're hoping this project becomes a project that people look towards as a benchmark of good development and being a good citizen of this city. This city has great potential, and we want to be part of the future of this city. And I think this project reflects every piece of this project that we've been working on for the last 5 years. I'm very blessed with an amazing team working on this project, and I believe that we have all it takes to make this an iconic project and a project that all Haligonians will be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. And you're only a little bit over time, which is better than usual. So I appreciate it. So with that,
Public hearing closed.
thank you. Public hearing's been closed. Moved by Councilor Mason, second by Councilor Cleary. All those in favor, say aye. Or raise your hand. Opposed? Seeing none. All right. If Councilor Mason, if you don't mind, if you want to put the motion on the floor, and we can start from there.
Happy to, Mr. Chair. I move that Halifax and West Community Council 1 approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially the same, substantially of the same form as set out in attachment A of the staff report dated March 10th, 2021, and 2, require the development agreement be signed by property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end. I so move.
Second, Councilor Cleary.
Moved by Councilor Mason, second by Councilor Cleary. Thank you, Councilor Mason.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, thank you very much to a number of people. I think it was 7 or 8 who wrote letters for, against, and asking questions to this process. Thank you to the one speaker who also wrote a letter, which shows tremendous initiative. I would say all the issues that were raised there in the letters were answered through the presentations and the questions. Affordability, where will the parking entrances be, what will happen with the alley, discuss the difference between 620 units and 550 spots. I feel like that was adequately answered because of the transit-oriented development nature of it. And the 3-story street wall, very pleased, always pleased when a developer supports and responds to the planning advisory committee, right? That to me is a real important step in the process, and glad to see that those were considered. So what we'll end up with here is a slightly smaller building than would be allowed in center plan, but we won't end up with the public streets that would have been required in center plan. Ironically, this lets us have more parking because there's parking under what would have been public streets where we wouldn't have allowed it unless the developer had dug down farther. The concerns that I'm hearing around parking and transit and traffic, especially, once you get into the regional center and close to employment centers like the base and the shipyard and the downtown, what we see is more and more people walking to work. In that neighborhood, 50 to 70% of people walk and bike to work. So cars tend to get parked if they even have them. And the part, if we don't have this level of development, this kind of intensity of development on the peninsula, you end up with development farther out, and those cars are still driving on the roads. They're definitely driving on the roads, and they're coming in from farther out. So, the traffic's going to exist if the population goes up. So, all in all, I have a minor concern, but not enough to derail to withdraw my support for the approval. I am going to support this, Mr. Chair. I am a little concerned about King Square and Clifton Green being somewhat shady, especially in the winter, despite what we heard about the shadow studies. But I think that's more of a subjective thing that I would do it differently. I don't own the property. It's not something where I feel like it's meeting the requirements of what we enabled when we allowed them to go ahead with the DA. And I don't see any reason to say no to that. And I'm satisfied with the architect's answer when Councillor Cleary asked the question. So other than that, I don't have any substantial concerns about it. And I'm really pleased to see 620 units already under construction on the peninsula. So I will be supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was taken by Councillor Cuddle's comments about the parks because I agree that the north end in particular has a dearth of open green spaces. So I did a quick search from this area to some of the parks. So Ardmore Park is 675 meters away. And I'll preface this by saying that, of course, the average able-bodied human walks about 5 or 6 kilometers per hour. So Ardmore Park is 675 meters away, so that's about a 6 to 7 minute walk. Shabupto Park is 900 meters away. Bilby Street Park is 360 meters away. Fort Needham is 970 meters away. The Common is 990 meters away. So all of these are less than 10-minute walk. But what's interesting is what was identified when we were looking at the Forum redevelopment was, of course, because of the lack of green open space and park space in the area, which would end up being about 270 meters from this site, is we're looking at putting a big green park in front of the Forum on Almond Street. And that would be incredibly beneficial and necessary, not just for this development, but think about the stuff that's going on Yonge Street. Think about the stuff that's going on Roby. So one of the things that we need to be keenly aware of, A, we need to densify and re-densify in many cases the peninsula, but B, we need to be cognizant of the green spaces that we're responsible for and on our municipal land and make sure we have more of them. So I do agree with Councillor Cuddle on that, but I have confidence that there's enough green space nearby and we will create more in the next few years. When I moved back to Halifax in 2001, we rented a house on Almond Street, actually about 2.5 blocks away from this site. And Ardmore, it's in the Ardmore neighborhood, and Ardmore Park was our main park when our kids, well, at that time we only had one kid and then had another one later. And you know, this is such a fantastic neighborhood. And on one side of me, I miss the fact that the tool library that was in this site and Jennifer Corson's store, the Renovators Resource, which used to be in the old bus depot, which is now moved to Islesville. You know, those things aren't there anymore, but what the neighborhood is getting is going to be way better than what used to be in there in those old, basically metal and wood sheds. This is going to be nice, high quality development. And to Councillor Mason's point, you know, listen, we don't own the land. We didn't pay hundreds of millions of dollars to develop this. So I'm not going to say I would have done X on this part and X on that side. But if they were shading areas that were already established, I would be more concerned about it. But when you're building buildings on your own site and residents will know what they're buying or renting before they come into it, that's a different kettle of fish altogether. So I'm like you, I'm less concerned about that. I'm very excited to see several hundred new people moving here over the next few years. You know, the big thing for me, and this is true for Miss Purdy's physiotherapy business, and it's true for the Coastal Cafe, and it's true for the Rona and the Shoppers Drug Mart and all the stores in the area, that they will be more successful when more people live in the neighborhood. And I'm very excited about that. So overall, this very nearly fits what we want from the center plan and has been coming for a very long time. So I'm happy to see this coming here, and I will also support this development agreement. You know, nothing is ever perfect, or at least in my mind, but I think the commitment to active transportation, public transportation, green open space makes this quite worthwhile. And I'm hoping more developers look at this and say that on larger sites, because this is a huge site, on larger sites of several acres, this is what we could do and this is what we should do. So I appreciate the applicant for that perspective. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cotto.
Yay, now's the time I can speak. Thank you. I will get this at some point. I just want to thank everyone for their presentations, for those who submitted letters and made a presentation tonight. It's great. You know, I am excited to see a development that pays particular attention to unit mix and unit size, and you know, has attention, you know, just the attention in detail to the street network and the quality, you know, creating a quality of open space. You know, that being said, you know, this is a big development, 620 units. It is it's considerable. It's going to be transformative, I think, in a good way. But to, you know, build on what I was saying further and what Councillor Cleary was saying, you know, that open space is, you know, is maybe for the people in there. It's not necessarily the larger network plan of green space that we need in order to allow people to move from there to the Common or to Needham Park or to Ardmore Park. That, you know, this is really something that we need to look at as a city. And I think it highlights the kind of the urgency we have around getting that sorted out sooner rather than later, because these types of dense developments is what we need, particularly like these mixed ones. You know, I actually spent most of my youth growing up in a condominium. But what made that successful for me as a child was being able to go beside my building and have spaces to play, or being able to move around a dense urban environment in a safe way for being a kid. And that is where I think we need to go as a city if we're going to be encouraging and supporting projects like this one. It's not just, you know, the individual parcel of land, it's the bigger picture that's really going to determine our long-term success as a city as a whole. So anyway, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that, because I think when we look at a private development on, you know, of this size, you know, I think that the concept aspires to many of the things we talk about wanting at council for complete communities and mixed use. I see no reason not to support it, and look forward to working together with developers in kind of creating that larger vision. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just wondering if anybody else would like to speak before I. No, just waiting to see if there's any frantic hands, because I know that's one of the favorites of Halifax West. Again, thank you, colleagues. I'll speak from here. Appreciate everyone who's written in, and some of the folks that have reached out to me directly during this time to either express their concerns or their support, and also the applicant for working with us and residents during these many years of the proposal. So I too have things I appreciate, and I do have things that I'm concerned about as well. The things that I appreciate is the fact that the time has been taken by the applicant to look at how to integrate this with current planning. I'll use current planning, so trying to make it modern, but also using principles to encourage wind impacts and pedestrian safety, and working with us as HRM to hopefully in the very near future have the protected bike lane on Almond Street come online soon. And that directly was related to their property and taking their property to allow for that. So I appreciate those aspects. I appreciated what would have been the art center, which is not, but the idea of what was potentially going to be there, and I'll speak to my concern with what's going to potentially be there now later. The other piece is I know that the applicant and the landowner is dedicated to affordable housing, and that's been something even at a public hearing that he has said he is going to work towards doing. And unfortunately, as we know and as we heard, there's no way we can write that into policy in the DA that we can require it to be that. And my only hope is that in the future we will be able to do that. But in today's context of this application, that it's been said many times by the landowner and to the public, to us on record. So I hope that they live up to the commitment of making a unit for affordable housing, and I'm assuming that would be related to the CMHC standards, which I believe, and maybe one of my colleagues can correct me, is 30% of your household income. 30% of your household income is what it should be, depending on the market as well. It would depend on how much that rent would be. What I'm concerned about when I look at the application is the the building C, I believe, or no, building E, which would have been the Art Center, which now went from 2 stories to 10. I am concerned about the impact that that might have on the street, and with the added use. I'd rather see that be more of a 3 to 4 story that would be in line with the houses in that on that street. But I understand the reason why from information tonight why the developer's doing that. The other piece that I still am a little confused about when hearing from the public in our public hearings that they wanted bigger units. What I didn't see that changed. So what I see the change was almost 200,000 square feet of more built area, so more places for people to live, more gross. I'm probably using the wrong terminology. Going from 700,010 to 800,090, and the residents that I've spoken to, the height was the biggest concern. In looking at these numbers, and all the buildings have now been made larger that will now fit more space in it. I just don't see how that related to having bigger units, because we don't have that information here, obviously, because we put a maximum on how many units can be in each building. I just don't see how almost 200,000 more square footage was added to add larger units when we don't have that information to actually say if that's true or not. So I am concerned about how that correlates to what we've heard, to what we're seeing today. But that's information that we have to look to in the future. And the other piece too is, I know there's been concerns around parking and what that means, and I think that's a true statement. Just we do have some parking issues around not just the district, but on the peninsula. But from my understanding, in Councillor Stat Cleary might be able to find this in the next 10 seconds. From my understanding, that most people who live in apartment buildings have one or no cars in their cores, and I know there's data somewhere. I couldn't find it. So some of the questions is, why are we not doing 1-for-1 center plan? We're trying to get away, and we have gotten away with center plan with 1-for-1 in development. So I support us not doing 1-for-1, because that encourages people to have vehicles. But we do need to make sure that then Councillor Cuttle will appreciate this. We need to have parking plans for our areas to make sure that we are doing the right things for businesses. So overall, businesses and residents. So overall, I support this. I do have concerns with the added density, but still not fully clear on where that comes from. The other piece that doesn't align with me, and I'll end it here, is the PAC. There are 2 and maybe even 3 buildings that don't have 3-story street walls. They go straight up to the maximum height. So the only question I have for staff is, there are some buildings that don't actually have the 3-story street walls, and that was one of the things that were mentioned a few times that was answered. So I'm just wondering if staff can clarify, because I believe 2, maybe even 3 buildings don't actually have 3-story street walls on the fronting the street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your question. Actually, all the buildings do offer roughly around a 2.5 meter setback from either the street or the proposed driveway. So all of the buildings, when we were negotiating with the applicant, they all do have some massing changes to pull it away, so they're not just that straight up wherever they front a street or a driveway.
So help me out, and this is why we got you professional planners to help us out here. So when I look at building D, in the report, building
Sorry,
D.
did you say D as in David?
Yeah, D as in David. So looking at that from the east elevation, so what street is is the building on the east elevation, where is that facing? Is that internal to the square, or is that facing Almond Street?
So the eastern elevation, that is facing the driveway. So the townhouses and that building face, building D, that's going down, I can't remember what it's called, Clifton Green. So the north elevation, that would be the elevation that's facing Almond Street.
So then for building C, is it the same thing for building C?
Let's see, so building C, you're asking.
So the street facing side that has a three-story street wall.
Correct. So building C is located in the very center of the site, so it actually doesn't front on any HRM public streets. It only fronts on King Street extension. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, correct. And then building the last one, building E, with the new height of 10 stories, St. Albans, that's going to have a three-story street wall.
All right. So let me just. So if you look at the south elevation, I believe that then shows you where that is set back from the driveway aisle. So there it's set back around 3 meters. And then the west elevation, you can see then the setback from St. Albans, which is another 3 meters.
Right. Okay, great. That was helpful. All right. Thank you so much, colleagues, and Jennifer for that clarification. I don't see anybody else on the, okay, Councilor Sutter, yep.
Trying to do the wave here. I just had a couple of questions. Could you tell me, or can I ask staff a couple of questions, or is it past that point?
No, you can ask staff, that's okay.
Okay. What is a pocket park?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, a pocket park is just a small park, a very small park.
Oh, okay. All right. The other question I had was, there's 620 units, and if you take away the 100 for possibly public parking, you then have only about 450 parking spots for 620 units. I know we're trying to get away from cars, but there are families that have 2 cars, potentially, if they work in 2 different areas of HRM. So has a developer thought about that as far as parking on the streets or extra parking for the tenants?
So on this site, there is a small surface lot that is identified, I think, as King's Plaza or something like that, and that does have a few surface parking spaces available. Mostly on the location of the site is one that has excellent access to public transit, and so the developer was really working on creating that transit-oriented development, which would have less parking spaces.
Okay. So downsizing the parking to encourage your cars. Okay.
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary, that was from earlier, right?
Nope, this time.
Okay.
Second time.
Yep, thank you.
I just wanted to just help out Councillor Stoddard. So when she was asking about parking, so one of the things that the center plan now no longer requires for growth centers and corridors is you don't have to provide parking in an apartment building on the peninsula or downtown Dartmouth unless the market conditions require the developer to do so. And so it's one of the things that when you look at looking forward to the new census coming this year. But what we know on the peninsula, as an example, is over half of the people who live here commute to work by walking, cycling, or taking transit. And so there isn't a need for it. So I just looked, it's a few years old now. Councillor Lindell Smith asked me to go look at some stats. So in Canada, average number of vehicles owned per household was about 1.5. So that includes, all single family homes across Canada, every jurisdiction. Smaller cities tend to have more car ownership than larger cities do. But apartment dwellers typically have less than one vehicle per unit in those. Again, these are a few years old, so I don't know if 2020, 2021 data would be any different. Probably not. And so it's likely that you wouldn't actually need those. When I moved to Almond Street in 2001, I moved here with a hand-me-down Pontiac Grand Prix that I was very happy to get rid of. And we were actually carless for several years in this neighborhood. And when the Forum would have the Christmas trees for sale at Christmas time, we took my son's little red wagon, a radio flyer, down to the Forum, put our Christmas tree on the wagon, dragged it back to the house. We would go down to the grocery store on Windsor or on Quinpool to get our groceries, again in the radio flyer or carrying it in our backpacks. And so the great thing about living in a very urban, dense neighborhood like this is you actually don't need a car. And actually, that's where I hope people go, is when we build developments like this, is people actually just say, you know what, between, well, it used to be called car share, now communato, or biking or walking, I don't need to own a car. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw my couple of 2 cents in there with some older statistics from 2013 and then the mix.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor. All right, so seeing nobody else on the list, I call for the question.
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Seeing none, that passes. So thank you, colleagues. Moving on to the next item, which is correspondence. Yep, which is correspondence. Mrs. Burke, correspondence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was 8 pieces of correspondence submitted for item 611, case 20871, and these have been circulated to the Community Council.
Thank you. There's no petitions, no presentations, there's no reports because we only did the hearing this evening. No in-camera items, and the date of our next meeting is May 11th, 2021. So I ask for a colleague to call for adjournment.
Adjourned.
Thank you, Councilor Stoddard. Adjourned. Everyone stay safe. I know we're going to be locked up for a moment, so I hope you get all your groceries, and if not, you're ordering them or curbside pickup. And thank you, staff and